I'm back another album review. Today's review is on the soundtrack for 28 Weeks Later. Before I go any further, I'd like to briefly talk about the movie. This is the sequel to the classic film 28 Days Later, and this film was released in 2007. I know this is a hot take, but I think this movie is actually better than its predecessor. It's on a bigger scale, it's more infected people, more bloodshed, more dead people, and more fire. There are some people who agree with me that this movie is also better than the first one. And now back to the soundtrack. It was composed by John Murphy, who also produced it with help from M.V. Gerhard. The executive producer was Matt Verbois. The mixing was done by Gustavo Borner and Tyler Barton at Igloo Studios and Distorter Studios, though Tyler also served as the engineer. He also programmed the soundtrack with help from Brent Arrowood. The soundtrack was recorded at CNSO in Prague. The orchestrator was Stephen Coleman, and the conductor was Jiri Kubik. The soundtrack was edited and mastered by James Nelson at Digital Outland. David C. Fine was responsible for the art direction. The soundtrack was originally released on June 17th, 2007 on Fox Music, though it was digital only at the time. It was re-released on June 2nd, 2009 on La La Land Records. Though only 1,500 copies were made, as you can see. Now let's talk about the songs. Even though they're out of order. This review will contain spoilers from the movie, so watch this review at your own risk. The intro to the soundtrack is Cottage Attack. This happens early in the movie where a group of infected people inside a cottage are attacked by a horde of infected people. Don Harris, Robert Carlyle's character, is the only one to escape. The next track is 28 theme. Don is running like hell trying to escape from the infected. That selfish piece of shit left his wife, Alice, Catherine McCormick's character, behind. Alice is definitely the character who suffered the worst. She was abandoned, infected, sterilized, restrained, tested on, and later murdered by her own husband. You just can't help but feel bad for her. After that is Welcome to Britain. Don reunites with his kids, Tammy and Andy, but he deliberately lied to them about what happened to Alice. Next up is Firebombing London. A group of F-15E Strike Eagles from the U.S. Air Force were deployed to firebomb London. This was to try and kill the infected, but at the cost of civilians getting barbecued. The body of Alice is also burned, but she didn't feel it because Don murdered her. Up next is London Deserted. London was deserted after the original outbreak, and reconstruction had begun 24 weeks after the infection. We followed up with Kiss of Death. This is where shit hits the fan. Don kisses Alice, not knowing that she was an asymptomatic carrier of the rage virus. He got infected, punched Alice multiple times, and dug his thumbs into her eyes in what was certainly the most brutal death scene in the whole film. That's followed up by Scooter Through London. This was when Tammy and Andy took a moped to their old home. Right after that is Going Home. Tammy and Andy arrived at their old home. What's next is Alice is Alive. This is where the U.S. Army found Alice, Tammy, and Andy prior to bringing them back to District 1. Alice was subsequently sterilized by guys in hazmat suits. That scene is always tough to watch because you can't help but feel bad for her. The scene after that has Scarlett testing Alice's blood, revealing that she had the virus. What's after that is Don abandons Alice. That's not the only heinous thing that Don did, because he also lied to his kids, barred them from seeing their mother, murdered his wife, caused a domino effect, reintroducing the rage virus to the general public, and even attacked and infected his own son. I'm gonna rip this band-aid off and say that General Stone was not the villain of the movie. Don was. This isn't the first time Robert Carlyle was the villain, because he's the same guy who played Renard in the James Bond film, The World Is Not Enough. I have chatted with some people online and they agree that Don was the true villain. What comes next is Night Watch. A group of snipers were observing some of the inhabitants of District 1 for signs of the infected. What follows is Go, Go, Go. Soldiers from the U.S. Army were deployed to kill the infected and were ordered not to kill the innocent. What comes after that is Code Red. The U.S. Army lost control, and General Stone ordered his troops to kill everyone, regardless of whether or not they're infected. One of the snipers, Sergeant Doyle, refuses to go along and bails out because he doesn't want to kill the innocent. Honestly, I don't blame him. The following track is Walk to Reagan's Park. Doyle and Scarlett were trying to help Tammy and Andy, along with some other survivors, get to safety. The track after that is Outbreak. Dawn caused a domino effect, reintroducing the rage virus. The track that comes next is Crowd Breakout. There's one part where a sniper kills an infected person and splatters blood over Andy. The track that follows is The Depot. A few survivors are subsequently killed by snipers. The track that comes after that is Helicopter Mayhem. Flynn, played by Harold Perrineau, sliced up dozens of infected people in his helicopter. It was certainly one of the goriest scenes of the whole movie, and it was fucking awesome. And next up is Andy's theme. Andy was infected by Don, though Don was subsequently gunned down by Tammy. It was certainly the most satisfying death scene in the whole movie. Although Andy was infected, he was an asymptomatic carrier just like Alice. Up next is Underground. Scarlett drove a Volvo with Tammy and Andy in it to get them underground. Doyle couldn't come with them because he pushed the car to get it started, but was subsequently fried by soldiers armed with flamethrowers. The next track is Leaving England. Flynn met up with Tammy and Andy at Wembley Stadium and flew them out of England, even though Doyle was burned and Scarlett was beaten to death by Don. The second to last track is Hymn to England. The final shot of the movie has a group of infected people running towards the Eiffel Tower, meaning that the rage virus has spread into mainland Europe. The outro for the soundtrack is John Murphy Interview. This is one of the few tracks that's exclusive to the physical version of the soundtrack. There's no information available regarding how the soundtrack performed commercially. It doesn't help that the physical version had a limited production run of only 1,500 copies. However, I have seen that people really like the soundtrack. Now for my thoughts. I really like the soundtrack. And just like the movie, I think it's even better than the first one. And I stand by that statement. The third movie in the franchise was supposed to be called 28 Months Later, but it spent a really long time in development hell, and that the title was changed to 28 Years Later, and it's going to be expanded into a trilogy. As of the making of this video, the movie is 3 months away from being released. You know damn well I'm going to see it. Overall, I highly recommend the soundtrack. You can find copies for sale on eBay and Discogs, but they're not cheap. And now's the part where I question you. Have you listened to the soundtrack for 28 Weeks Later? If so, what do you think about it? What's your favorite song from it? Which movie in the franchise do you think is better, Days or Weeks? Are you going to see 28 Years Later? Let me know in the comments. If you like the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to press the notification bell to notify of future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video.